Welcome to Owner Insights, the podcast that uncovers stories about businesses and their owners. I'm James Orchard, Managing Director of the Crew Harris Orchard. In each episode, I sit down with a business owner to hear their stories. We discuss things like why they started their business, what was their motivation, the mistakes they've made, the lessons they've learned, keys to growth, and what they do differently. These aren't how-to guides or do-as-I-say tips, just real conversations between two business people. Join us as we explore what it takes to become a truly great business. Lester Marshall, welcome to Owner Insights.
Good morning, James. How are you?
Very well.
Blown in?
Blown in. It's a rough day today.
It's the roughest 1 in 5 year storm apparently hitting
right?
today. Yeah.
Right, and you believe that's what's going to happen?
Well, they used to say 1 in 50, then it was 1 in 100, and I said, well,
right.
You can't keep going longer. Now they're going to 1 in 5 year.
Okay, well, let's not talk about the bomb. let's talk about Coffin Bay Oyster Farm.
Yeah.
Now, I'm lucky enough to have spent a lot of time at Coffin Bay over the years. Got some great friends who have a place over there. And when I think of Coffin Bay, I think of magnificent glistening water, and I think of beautiful fishing country, and you see the oyster farms everywhere you go in that part of the world. Is that really what it's like being the owner of Coffin Bay Oyster Farms?
Well, we watch the recreational boats now. They give us the heebie-jeebies, so they probably don't like the oyster farms, and we don't like the recos.
Well, you got to be careful when you're driving around. Coffin Bay is a massive piece of water, enormous piece of water. But those farms are everywhere, and particularly when the tide's up, you can easily drive over them.
And to think we were part of. There was no oyster farms bar the small site in the township of Coffin Bay, the original farm that was set up there in 1969. So since
you weren't there
then,
in 1969.
No, I was not. I was born in 1964.
Right.
But the oyster industry is a lot older than that. I think we touched on it the other day. And but no, as far as the development of putting posts and rack and rail and lines and baskets in the water, it would be incredible to think how much tons of infrastructure has actually gone in, which has then obviously caused navigational issues for different ones. But look, for the most part, the advent of GPSs in boats are very good, and a lot of the fishing is done around the oyster farms, so they find them they're very good at
lots of whiting.
It's been a real positive for the estuary as far as the biodiversity in the bay. It's been fantastic.
Actually, do you want to just go back to the origins of oyster farming in Coffin Bay? Because they've been farming oysters for decades and decades and decades, have they not? Well before farming actually came to be.
Yeah, look, it's quite fun. I'm very passionate about the history of Coffin Bay and the oyster industry, and learned a lot. And so the first industry was the native Angazi oysters that were there, and they started dredging them out in the about 1845, 1846, a long time ago. That was done all over South Australia, but Coffin Bay was the El Dorado of oysters, and they had.
And why is that?
The food that came into the bay, they just grew big and meaty and had an incredible flavour. But there was the bounty. There was just so many.
Yeah,
and that comes down to a food source that sustains a big biomass of oysters.
Yeah. So the unique unique features of Coffin Bay. The size of it, the tidal movements, the algae that comes into it, all led to that being a great place to actually farm oysters.
The main thing is the proximity to the continental shelf.
Right.
So that's what makes Coffin Bay unique to any other estuary.
And just for those who don't know, sorry to interrupt, Coffin Bay is about 40 minutes west of Port Lincoln.
Yep.
On the Eyre Peninsula, at the bottom of the Eyre Peninsula.
On the southwest corner of Eyre Peninsula. So we're not that far from the estuary of Coffin Bay is not far from the continental shelf. And the continental shelf runs obviously all along the southern Australia. But we get these upwellings of nutrient-rich water, which all the dead material of the world washes off the land and into the sea, and then it sort of makes its way down into the abysses, into the dark depths of the continental shelves around the world. But every now and then, certain currents will bring up the nutrients, which is the same as fertilizer on the land. Be like putting a hit of urea on your pasture to make your crops grow. We get the nutrients come up. Sunlight doesn't go past 100 metres, so that the algae can't grow in the darkness. So algae are the plants of the ocean, or like clover on the land. So you need sunlight, photosynthesis. You need obviously moisture, so the seawater. But the main thing they need is nutrients. And so then the algae flourish, and so it's just like our oysters are just walking around in clover, and so they just sit there because oysters can't move, not like fish. So pilchards are filter feeders like sardines, and they're the bottom of the food chain, and they just run around, and that's why there's hordes of them around there, because they just eat the algae as well, and then the tuna, and everything wants to eat the sardines, but predominantly tuna, which is why there's a big tuna industry in Port Lincoln.
Right.
But so the oysters themselves, we get massive algal blooms, and for the most part, they are of excellent quality, and the oysters just flourish, and we've been a bounty of the sea from there. Compared to say like Cow's still a great oyster growing region, but totally different flavour. Yeah. Because they're in the Gulf, and they're in almost a very small bay, but they don't get any nutrients from the Gulf as such, if that makes sense.
And Coffin Bay oysters are a brand of itself. You can go anywhere in Australia, certainly, but overseas as well. Yeah. And people recognise Coffin Bay oysters in a similar way that they recognise Barossa Valley red wine.
Absolutely. So just touching back on that history, and I digress a little bit.
We better talk about that.
The oysters that were harvested in the 1800s came from Coffin Bay they were dredged by 30-odd oyster cutters. There was about 80, 90 staff at Oyster Town in Kelly Bay. Mm-hmm. They then spent all day sailing, slowly dredging up, and put the oysters in their little lots in shallow water by Oyster Town. The drays and the bullocks came along, and they put them in the bags, and they put them seaweed on top, wet it down, and they clip-clopped into Port Lincoln, and they put them back in the water at Port Lincoln with little circles of sticks to mark the different oyster buyers. There was a couple, and then they would put him on the catches, the two masters, and they would sail them to Adelaide, to Glenelg. And George Moseley was an oyster merchant, and Moseley Square at Glenelg is testament to his historical footprint at Glenelg. Yeah. But in 1872, I have a photo, and it's interesting where we're sitting doing this podcast, is that just across the road here on King William Street, on the corner of Beehive Corner, that actually was Moseley's Oyster Rooms. Right. And there's an advertisement in 1872 that he was selling Coffin Bay oysters. Right. In 1872. So the brand's been around a long time. Yeah. And now they were the Angazis, the native ones.
So the native ones, they grew on the bay floor?
They're a subtidal species, correct? They're a totally different flavour to the Pacifics we grow today, which are intertidal species. So the Angazi industry started in around 1845, and it was finished by 1945. And
why were they finished?
They got dredged out. Right. So they got absolutely
none
smashed.
Left.
No, not of commercial quantities. There was a spasmodic few here and there. But they had an oyster fisheries inspector put in about the 1880, George Dabovich, and he was the oyster inspector for all of South Australia. And the first law in the state government passed here was to protect the oysters that were put down on the seabed for George Moseley, because the riffraff were just, they were free for all, go and pinch them. So they went, can't have, because all the rich and famous wanted to eat their oysters up here in King William Street. Yeah. Well, can't have that. They brought a law in saying, it was pretty serious law, imprisonment if you got caught. Yeah. Anyway, it's been a long journey. So the Angazis basically were fished out, and the seafloor was made in a way that they couldn't sustain. They needed fresh, clean oyster shell to spat onto. There was farming took place, and they cleared a lot of the vegetation on the Eyre Peninsula, and we had a lot of sedimentation come down the rivers, and they smothered the estuaries throughout Coffin Bay, made it very undesirable habitat for the Angazis. And that's the new reef restoration projects that's going on around South Australia at the moment, is about putting those oyster shells back on the sea floor, so that adds a clean substrate for the native Angazis to spat onto. So that's happening, so which is a good thing.
But so the bay gets basically cleaned out of all its oysters.
Yeah.
But it sounds like there was a bit of a gap between that and when the actual farming started.
Yes. Well, so Mortlock, William Mortlock had Mortlock Homestead in Coffin Bay in 1800s, and he actually applied for we actually got a 4 acre lease to put Angazis there, but that never worked. So that was sort of went back to the state government or whatever. But in 1966, there was five fellows playing around with Sydney rock oysters, and they hadn't trialled the Pacifics yet, but they applied for different leases, and the government said, no, you guys all go together and put in a 4 hectare site just in the front there in Coffin Bay in the township, and that became known as Oyster Farmers Coffin Bay Proprietary Limited. And they got the first ever Pacific spat from Tasmania in 1969, and it was put into Coffin Bay and Stansbury. They flourished and did really well. Yeah. The Sydney Rock ones did not. They died out, the ones that trialled. And so from there, that was in basically 1970. And then that went along basically on its own. Stansbury didn't really take off. They did okay, but not really that well. Coffin Bay was fantastic.
So the natural features of Coffin Bay once again came to the fore with the commercial farming of the oysters, but a different species.
That's right. So that's exactly right. So in about, I think it was around 1986, 1985, Gary Olds applied for the first latter-day commercial oyster farm in Dutton Bay and a little bay called Lavender Bay. And it was the first of its type, and those bays are all around Coffin Bay. That part of Coffin Bay waterways, yeah. There's Dutton Bay, Kelly Bay, and Port Douglas Bay. And so he was in court for quite a few years. Judge Roeder had to make because there was a lot of resentment, locals, people didn't want oyster farms in the water. And I sort of had a bit of a understanding of that feeling. But as it came down, it was just like farming on the land. I mean, we need to produce food on the land, and so we need to produce the opportunity to produce food in the sea. So Gary was approved for, I think, 3.5 hectares, and then that paved the way for the rest of the industry in around Cowell, Sejoona, Streaky Bay, Smoky Bay, and Haslam. And then the industry took off. And so we got involved. It was about that stage. I'd bought a farm on the land in a big swamp on the Eyre Peninsula at 21. I was 21, and that was 1985. And so I was busy raising fat lambs and wool and all that sort of caper and enjoying it. Gary would come and help me cart hay, and I'd go down and help shovel oysters for him. We'd just trade, like, work for each other. And I really enjoyed the work and loved the water and, a great affiliation with the sea. And that all went pretty well until I think it was in the 1990. I was 26 and I'd taken a fairly big loan to buy this farm. I was working hard, but it was the recession we had to have, and interest rates went to 21%. But the most devastating thing was there was no market for sheep, and we couldn't sell them. The transport per head was more expensive than the actual animal was worth. So I'd leased farmland and was growing my business and had all these aspirations, very optimistic about the future. And, no market for my sheep. So I started cutting their throats and ended up shooting over 3,000 sheep, my entire flock.
Because it was cheaper to do that?
Well, I couldn't sell them.
Yeah.
They had to go. They had to go somewhere. We couldn't afford to keep them. And I had to get out of farming, and I just couldn't sustain my loan. And it wasn't just for me. It was the whole farming regional sector across Australia that was involved with 21% interest rates. Was just, anyone with a loan was just crippled. So I got out of the ag sector and had a bit of a break.
Can I just interrupt you there? It's really interesting that you were going through problems on the land, which a lot of farmers probably regularly go through, but you decided to get out of it. A lot of farmers stick with it. Why do you think at 26 you decided to get out of it?
The size of my farming operations, the size of my life, there was just no way we couldn't we just couldn't make ends meet. We had to sell the farm to pay the debt. Like there was just no, and there was a lot of farms like that.
So you could pay the debt back after you sold the farm?
Yeah, but not much left over.
Yeah.
We had a little bit left over, and so we bought. So it was at that point we took off I was married at that stage, and Julianne and I took off and headed to Queensland with a caravan and old Land Rover and had a break, and came back. And in the meantime, a friend of the family of the Oldses, which is why I worked with Gary, said, "Look, I've got a 4 hectare site in Kelly Bay. I'm not going to use." This was John and Wendy Chapman, and John and Wendy Chapman started the fish factory down here on Port Adelaide down there. So they were the original owners and started the actual fish factory that it is today. And but anyway, he said, "Look, I can't come from Adelaide over to farm this water. Would you like to lease it?" So we said, "Got nothing better to do. We'll give it a go." So we started leasing that and didn't make any money out of it, and we're still truck driving and farming and shearing and doing all those sort of things to make ends meet. But we got our confidence, and we started to learn, and we started we were growing oysters, but we weren't selling them to the market very well. They didn't get much meat in them in Kelly Bay. So that was about, when was that? About 92. We started leasing that, so it would have been about 28. And and I think it was around then, 1992, we bought our first spat, 150,000 oysters in September. And that was and I've still got the photo. It's a momentous occasion. That was a big step into oyster farming.
So just for those listening who aren't familiar with oyster farming, spat is basically the baby oyster that you buy from Tasmania.
From the hatcheries. So there was 3 hatcheries in Tasmania at that time and none in South Australia.
And you still buy your spat from Tasmania?
No, we can't. No, and I'll get to that in a minute.
Yeah.
But yeah, so spat is basically about a 3 to 5 millimetre oyster. Once it sort of gets above 15 millimetre, you sort of say it's an on-grown oyster, a bit like a yearling or got a calf. And
so is the spat in a shell, or do you?
Oh yeah. It's a completely formed little oyster. So when they get a male and female oyster, they check the sexes. They put them in the warm water, and they trigger them at the temperature to spawn out the eggs and the sperm, and they form a larvae. They fertilise, and the larvae swims around for about 17 days until it decides to settle and spat onto something clean. In the modern day hatcheries, they add a drop of adrenaline into the water, and it triggers them to just basically drop out of the water, and they stay what they call single seed. You don't want all this stuck together. You end up with doubles and triples and quadruples, and it's a hell of a mess. So they've worked the technique out how to make single seed oysters, and that's well documented over the world today, and that's been in the way that's managed us to be highly, manage our shape of our oysters and the numbers. So when we got our spat, we were working around in Kelly Bay. Gary was in Dutton Bay. We had a couple other mates who were farming in Dutton Bay. Ian Otto and the Owenses were down there. And there was quite an industry going, but no one was really making a lot of money. And there was some outside water, which was in the Port Douglas region, that was there was no farming out there at all. They used to dredge out there, 100-odd years ago. Anyway, it was quite a long way. It was wild and rough. But there was 5 of us that we went to the government of the day, which is Dale Baker, and asked that we could put a 1 hectare R&D site out there to trial for 2 years to see whether they'd grow and fatten, and whether it was too wild, too rough, too anything, and to see how it went. And so they signed that off, and we wanted our first commercial rights to that area if it proved successful. And little did we know how successful that would be. So we formed the Douglas Group, and the 5 of us went out there and put in the first post, and we put in a trial racks and oysters, and they just took off.
Right.
Unbelievable. Chalk and cheese. Like, it was amazing. And the meat just whoosh, and the shells were made, they just took off, and then it became the gold rush, and then everybody wanted to slice of the action out there. And you can't blame the rest of the oyster industry, and other entrants wanted to get in there. We didn't know what we were sitting on, really, but we were 7 years in court trying to get this all worked out with the state government, because there was such a really strong, pitch to try and get your right location. So oyster farming is different to say tuna farming or any other seafood, because you just go out and you've got big areas to go and catch your fish. This is farming. You need a spot. You need your own GPS coordinates and put your posts in. So anyway, so we've that all sort of settled down, and we got our 5 locations. The rest of the industry got their locations throughout the bay system, and then things started to move. So I think.
So basically, you started off. Things weren't actually going that well.
No,
but for some reason you had an inkling about an innovation. You talked about R&D. There was
an opportunity, I suppose. There was untapped resource that we weren't sure whether it was any good or not, and put in the Port Douglas in the Horse Peninsula region, actually.
Yeah, yeah. So you, like any business, you decided to pivot and innovate.
Yep.
You went and tried something else, and it went really well.
It went well, yes.
So that was the beginning of the modern era of Coffin Bay success.
Absolutely, no question. And there's some really interesting stepping stones along the way, and that we were involved with. And when you look back now, you think, wow, that's just incredible, because when you had no idea, like, really what was the potential.
You were forced into this innovation, were you? Because things just weren't working
out. They weren't great. That's right. But you didn't know whether that was the way it was always going to be. It was okay. We could still sell oysters out of Kelly Bay. They were okay, but they just weren't. Didn't realise what A grade, A plus could be. If you're selling.
So this is mid-90s?
Early 90s.
Yeah.
And so 1997, we did our first, in February it was. I was 32 years old, and we did our first ever proper sales of 1,875 dozen. That was for the month, by the way. So that's about 1.8 tonne for the month. And so that was that was like, we'd hit gold.
Paid it.
Money. Oh, gee whiz. But more importantly, we were building experience. We were building, you couldn't buy any machinery, any baskets off the shelf. Everything was hand designed. Everything was like, hand sawn, and everything was like, there was nothing made. So you had to be very, very innovative, and it was a time of great innovation. And there's a lot of projects out in my paddock that didn't make it past the tool shed.
Yeah, sure.
but you put them in the water, you try them, went, oh, yep, no, that works. And then you keep going with that line of thought, and others that didn't work.
So there's actually quite a bit of complication around something that seems relatively simple. Get some spat, stick it in a cage, put it on a post out in the water, have the water run through it, bang, there's your oyster. A bit more to it than that.
Well, when you given, we had 4 hectares in Kelly Bay. So 4 hectares, a hectare, obviously 100 metres by 100 metres, you're allowed to put a kilometre rack on there, and a kilometre rack was 2,500 baskets per, they were called pillow setters, per kilometre. And so you could hold about 25 tonne on a hectare, like fully grown, not mature oysters. So times that out by, then we got 10 hectares each, then that's 250 tonne. So all of a sudden you're going, everything's like escalating fast, and there's nothing harder than one trying to grow oysters, but to have oysters that grow and you can't actually bring in the tonnage in, and they outgrow. They grow in, they fill up the basket and grow out through the roof, and it just becomes they turn to not very good. So it's a massive problem to manage, like farming. You got to be able to farm, and so it was a really interesting. Well, we hadn't hit that point yet, and so by the way, 1997 was a great year because it was the Crows' first premiership too. By the way, so
that's right.
So it was a good year. Yes, so 1997 was a very, very optimistic year.
Yeah,
and
did you have Darren Jarman working in your oyster farms?
I wish I would have given him anything. I think so. 1998. In May, we were the first company, and we'd formed a relationship with Angelakis Brothers at this stage, because we were only selling within South Australia, and we'd grown all these oysters, and I kept thinking, where are we going to sell them all? What's potentially coming? So I formed a really strong relationship with Michael Angelakis and his family, and he was great. He was absolutely brilliant, great ambassador for South Australia, but particularly the oyster industry. And his contacts are far and wide, which I worked out.
So Michael Angelakis was your Darren Jarman.
He was. And there's no question about it. He's a man to be reckoned with. So what he did, we said, look, Michael, we're going to have we've grown 20, I think it was 20 tonne. So 98, we actually produced 40 tonne of oysters. And in May that year of 98, he took us as the first oyster company, and we went across to Doyle's at Watson's Bay and met Peter Doyle, the famous Peter Doyle. He's a good mate of Michael's. Everyone's a good mate of Michael's.
That restaurant's still there.
And we took our oysters in there, and I was as nervous as hell. And they shucked them and they put them out, and we sat with Peter Doyle, and I think it was Mary, and they tried them, and they said, these are fantastic.
Wow. And
so they said, we'll have some more, thank you. And so that was, I think we sent 250 dozen was that shipment. So that's like 20, there was about 25 dozen in a bag. So actually back then they were probably the big bags. They were probably 50 dozen, the big bags. So anyway, so that then opened up, and we had to get approval from the state government, because New South Wales wouldn't let oysters in there without a health certificate to say that they were clean and healthy. So all that happened at the same time. And that was a big stepping stone for the rest of the industry. And so we all then walked through that door into Melbourne, and from then on it started to grow. So that was pretty amazing. In the year,
okay, so we're now producing a heap of oysters.
Yep, about 40 tonne. Yep.
We've got established markets in South Australia. We're now going into Sydney.
Yep.
So is our demand starting to match our supply?
Well, we'd outgrown South Australia pretty much, because Cowell and Ceduna, Smoky Bay particularly, they grow some beautiful oysters, and they were coming on strong. So we were all trying to find, and we had real problems. We were dealing with a small amount of opportunities here in South Australia. And back then, oysters weren't on the menus, right? There was a big gap between the old Angazi industry, which was popular everywhere, and then there was this gap of no real oysters. It was just fish and chips predominantly, and prawns. So to teach people to eat oysters was like, there was some, but then there was others. So it was a really big, who's going to, because it's a really tricky thing on how you cannot pick an oyster lover. We then felt we could invest more infrastructure into, so we'd bought a land base of 95 acres with the last bit of money we'd had from when we shot the sheep and sold our farm. And that gave us a really, because you got to spend a fair bit on infrastructure when you're farming, and land is one of them. Sheds, you had to build shed, power, boats. We had no boat. We had a little tinnies, dinghies. We designed. Everything got designed from nothing. I mean, we went to Tassie and we copied a bit of what they did. They were ahead of us. We've really, the industry's just gone nuts.
Okay, so you've had to invest in land, massive sheds, those big boats that you drive out there
staff
at 1,000,000 miles an hour, staff. Just tell us a little bit about where your business is at now in terms of how many boats, how many staff, how many oysters you sell each year, because my simple arithmetic says that I walk into Doyle's and if I buy a dozen oysters, it's probably going to be costing $50 or $60
or 70.
So it's $5 or $6 an oyster.
Yeah,
you're selling thousands of these things. You must be going all right.
It is a highly profitable business when your farm is full, like at 100%. Well, about 180 to 100%. But it's been a really tough gig since 2016, and so we've had some real downs in the industry. We've had a lot of ups, and I suppose I was just saying that was the up, and going, and I think we got up to, I think, around that 300,000 dozen in 2008. 300. That's about 300 tonne of oysters, and that was the maximum we've done.
A few people got the calculator out doing the maths now.
Yeah, that's right. So obviously, the average is around $10 a dozen now, so that'd be like 3.3 million. But that's back then. It wasn't that much. I'm not sure what that'd have been. Would have been probably half of that. Excuse me. We had the GFC in 2008, so we pulled back a bit, and then we sort of watched how that sort of played out, and the oyster industry people still went out to eat. They stopped going overseas. They stopped the new cars. They stopped the new verandas or extensions to the kitchen for the wife. But they said we're still going to go out and eat well, comfort food.
People still eat. They still travel they still send their kids to private schools.
That's right.
Yeah.
So we did all right, and so away we went, and we kept going. We invested at that stage. We bought an oyster farm in Stansbury. So the water in Coffin Bay became really expensive. It was somewhere getting up to that stage around.
So sorry, you're still leasing your farms at this point, eh?
No, we own the oyster farms,
right?
So that we pay like a rental fee to the government, like you do on the land, like rates. So you pay rates on your land, your house block.
Yes.
So we pay same for our say 10 hectares, and so we had 14 hectares of water, and I think we leased another 2 or 3 in Coffin Bay. But the problem was to expand. It was around $300,000 a hectare to purchase at that stage, and so we went, that's a lot of money. So we looked around. We just wanted to grow some background oysters. So it's a bit like having a feedlot, in a lush area in South Australia, but you wanted station cattle, buy a station to some cheap land to bring in weaners, clean, score 3, and then just keep going through the business. So we identified Stansbury as our area that was cheap, grew no barnacles on the oysters, was clean, and proven oyster growing area. So we bought in over there, and away we went, and that would have been about when I was about 41 to 2012 roughly. And we then set a target of this 500,000 dozen a year, and that was around. I had a business coach prior to that, Philip Armfield from Armfield Associates, and he really set me on the path of a vision and a mission and getting all my ducks in a row to actually go, because there was too many zeros on everything, and you just didn't want to be just a farmer. I had to become not a manager of oysters so much, but a manager of people. And that included customers.
Right.
And a big change in thinking, and a big change in where I spent my time. But it was exciting, and I didn't mind that.
Sorry, Lester, to interrupt again, but it's like this is a common theme with a lot of the businesses that we speak to, is that they start out and you're focusing on the core plumbing skill, whatever it is, building houses, being an electrician, whatever it is. But then you get to a certain point where you got to get off the tools and you have to develop other skills if you want your business to continue growing.
And that's where Philip Armfield was excellent in that, the vision and the mission. He really said, what do you want to do? What's your passion? What do you really want? And then so we sat down and, been through that, shot all those sheep and saw my mates leave the region, and the footy clubs closed down, the schools closed down. So I went, I really want to, get money in from overseas. I really want to make our region, which was, Lake Wangari, which Marble Range Football Club, and that was my sort of, it's a spiritual area. And so it was important to me to bring as much money into the region for jobs and growth, because the employment was terrible. To get employment, you had to basically go off to the mines. And then it was just no.
So when Phil Arnfield said to you, what do you want to do so this is 2009, 10?
Probably a bit after that, maybe 12, around that time.
So he says to you, what do you want to do? You've got a business which is going really, really well. You're able to sell all your oysters. You've got quite a few people employed. You've got lots of plant and equipment, boats, sheds, all that sort of stuff. What do you say to him in response? What do you want to do?
Well, we wanted to get fully grow our business to its full potential, which I felt with Stansbury was around 500,000 dozen. We really wanted to invest in our managers and in good people, and we wanted to take our oysters to the world. We were very proud of our product, and rightfully so. It's a wonderful product, great flavour, it's amazing. So, and I'd started doing some travels at this stage internationally, and there was a gap there I didn't sort of pick up on, but I went overseas with Rob Kerrin, the Premier at the time, and Michael Angelakis in the year 2000, and we went to Singapore, and we were doing about 100 tonne at that stage, and I saw the opportunities overseas, and that really excited me. So, but you got to be consistent. You can't just sort of I don't know. You got to be organised, and that's where Philip got me organised. So standard operating procedures, meetings, notes, be on just get organised and write everything down.
Were you about to say be on time?
Pardon?
Were you about to say be on time?
Be on time, yeah. Everything's got to be on time.
Well, I think what you were getting at there was doing things that are just basics when it comes to business.
Yeah.
Keeping records of minutes, or keeping minutes.
Yeah.
Having meetings.
That's right.
Working out what to talk about.
Yeah.
But you clearly had some ambition. Where'd the ambition come from?
I reckon it would have come from, definitely from my parents. My dad and he was a school teacher, and we travelled around a lot when we were younger, but we were from the Barossa Valley and we started farming there, and he was still school teaching. Went to Udunda when I was 10 or something, and we had a dairy farm there, and he was school teaching. But at 15, we'd had a lot to do with Fisherman's Bay and the marine side of things, and his father was a sinker maker, and for fishing it was a big part of our bloodline. But they saw an opportunity in Port Lincoln or Coffin Bay to start a dairy farm, build a whole brand new 9-a-side herringbone, which was state-of-the-art in those days. And I was 15 years old, and I was part of that, and we did that for 5 years. And that probably taught me about having a goal and having the courage to go for it. So that was sort of my background, and I think that's that, to have a go. But both Mum and Dad, they were amazing with having a vision and going for it. Probably didn't have a great way of what's the word? They once they completed an area, they got overloaded. They weren't very good at employing people, so they would then sell the bit because they just couldn't cope. So I learned from this. There's a lot of things that they did. I went, this was great, but these are the areas that we should employ people to help us milk, because milking cows is 7 days a week, twice a day. Worse than oyster farming. You have the weekend off. It's fantastic. But no, dairy farming is a terrible job. It's from the point of view, it's relentless, and it's an animal, and it's.
But you saw what your mum and dad, you thought didn't do right,
and you thought and didn't do right.
Yeah. But you've had quite a few challenges, particularly in the last 10 years as well.
Yes, I'm about to get into some of those.
Let's get into what's actually not gone right, because I'm aware of quite a few of those things, which are going to paint a slightly different picture.
Well, it certainly we had a setback in so Stansbury began in 2012 when I was 41, and we in 2014 I turned 50. We had 13 million oysters we'd bought on hand, and now most people have 2, 3, 4, 5 million, but because we'd bought Stansbury, we upped the ante and we'd invested in up to 13 million oysters.
So when you say you'd bought them, you got the spats.
So the spat, we had everything. So we had matures.
What's a spat cost, by the way? Back in 2004, roughly.
That was probably around 2 or 3 cents each.
Oh, okay.
But that was around 20 grand a million, so 10 million's 200 grand, and plus another. So
okay.
But today they're more like $50 a thousand, and so that's a lot of money. And but that wasn't all spat. That was matures, juvenile, the whole lot. But we had in that year in February we had the dreaded Carenia Mickey Moitoi algal bloom came in and wiped out and killed over 50% of them. And I'd advertised for a manager all over Australia to come in and manage Coffin Bay Oyster Farm because things were like accelerating. Yeah. And he came and started, and 2 months later I had to let him go. We just didn't have the stock that just died. This is our first major setback in the oyster industry.
So this was an algal bloom that no one ever heard of.
No.
How would you compare it to the one that we've got now?
Very similar, and that's why I'm going to touch on that in a minute. Because we've learnt a lot. Yeah. And the Mickey Moitoi is of the same family as the one we've got now, like Carenia, I should say. Yeah. But it didn't pose any threat to human health. It just, the oysters didn't like it. It's particularly the spat. So they
killed half your oysters.
At least over 50%, major setback. And it was at this stage, 2016, Sam Facey from Crew Harris came on board. So Philip semi-retired,
Yes.
and then Sam came on, took over, and I went from a Port Power supporter to a Carlton supporter.
Oh my God!
And that was, I felt more sorry for Sam over the last 10 years. But anyway, he's been he's been absolutely fantastic. But the poor bugger, we've just had a terrible 10 years, and I'm not blaming him, but it is quite ironic.
No, you
that
can blame him.
I will blame him.
It's a bit funny.
Anyway, so Sam comes on board, and we're down a bit on our spat, but that was just the Carina had that bloom for only probably 6 weeks, and that buggered off, and then everything returned to normal. We were left with licking our wounds, and we'd spent all this money, and so we then held off and didn't buy much more spat because we just had spent a lot. And then in 2016, we had the POMS virus showed up in Tasmania. That was from Sydney, and I think it went by the yachts, the Sydney Hobart down the Derwent River. And at that stage, all the spat came from Tasmania. So there was no spat importation we couldn't buy any spat from Tassie. So it was a massive setback. I had 18 staff. I had over $1 million spent at Stansbury. I went down to 2 staff, and my boat at Stansbury never went in the water for 5 years. I hadn't put one oyster in Stansbury for 5 years.
So all of a sudden, you can't buy any spat at all.
No. Well, we got a little bit. There was a little hatchery that started in Kelly Bay by Rodney Grove Jones, and and another one at Louth Bay. But they were just not set up to take on the volume that was required. But then shellfish culture that was the big hatchery, and Cameron's of Tasmania with the other hatchery in Tassie. They both started setting up in one at Louth and one at Cow. But it took years for them to get land sites, and then this and that and something else. And anyway, it's been we even now the spat is a little bit on the shortage side. Even after 10 years later, they still haven't got things quite right.
So this started in 2016.
2016.
How long did it take until they could actually get you a decent amount of supply of spat?
Within 5-6 years.
So what did you do in between, Tom?
Well, we just had to cut costs. It was horrific, and we just had to sit on our hands and just wait it out and just hope. I thought it'd take 2 to 3 years till things sort of returned to normal. Never in my wildest dreams did I think it'd last nearly 10 years or 8 years.
But if I go to Doyle's, I can still buy oysters. Where were they coming from?
So we slowed our sales right down. So we still had continuity. So I didn't. Some farmers just sold the lot out, put all their stuff off, and got a caravan and went on holidays for a few years.
Yeah.
But we just bought into Stansbury. We just spent $1 million. I could not afford to do that.
Yeah.
So I went, let's conserve what oysters we got. And Rodney, they worked hard to get. So we were getting some spat coming in, and that was enough to keep the doors open and the lights on. But we were waiting, and at that stage, we'd been getting desexed oysters or triploid spawnless oysters from Tasmania, from our shellfish, and that's set up that way you could sell all year round. So that was another major positive in our business, that we could sell oysters at the prime time of the year, fat, beautiful oysters, same as seedless watermelons and seedless grapes, same technology, perfect, great. I still can't get them today after 10 years. Like, it's nearly driving me crazy.
But you are. Forgive me for this analogy, but you are like Carlton in that you are massively underperforming.
Yes.
But you're still making it look okay, and you're still in the comp.
Yeah.
Because they can't kick you out of the comp.
That's right. So we managed our way carefully through that period, and we tried not to overspend, and we just held on basically. And we did a pretty good job of that, I thought. So we'd gone down to 2 staff, then we started to get a bit more spat. And then that was in 2000. So that was the next 2, 3, 4 years, and then we started to get a bit more volume. We started to get a bit more. I'll just say, in the 10 years from 16 to now, it's cost us about $20 million in turnover. Yeah, so that's a challenge for anyone to take that hit in your back pocket. That's turnover, not profit. Anyway, so then where did we get? Then 2020, we had a COVID outbreak. Worldwide sales plummeted, restaurants closed, all our markets went, we can't sell your product. Holy hell.
What
do we do now?
So now we've got enough spat back online that we can actually produce oysters, but you can't sell them now.
Well, we could, not sell very many, because the markets, restaurants. You remember all the spacing and gee.
So you've still have you increased your employees from 2?
Oh yeah.
So you got to put them all off again.
No. We looked at all the opportunities to sell oysters. So we were careful. Yeah, once again, you had to be careful. You couldn't go full steam ahead. You had to. Yeah. We had product, which I'd rather have product and try and find a market than have markets and no product.
Yeah.
All right. That's you haven't got the product. You're buggered. Anyway, so COVID, so worldwide sales plummeted. Restaurants closed. In 2021, when I was 57, we decided we'd start our own seafood centre, which I'd always wanted to do, my own outlets. And we've been playing around with these at farmers markets for years and whatever. So we set up and decided Port Wakefield was the place to go. And everything proved that would be quite successful. And so we said, right, and this is when, Sam Facey held my hand. We went up there and we set up, and it was incredibly exciting. And we had lots of positive feedback. And the day we advertised on our social media network and we opened the doors to the public, we'd had a soft launch for a week and told nobody. We had a Vibrio outbreak for the first time ever in South Australia, and the SA Health Government closed all oyster sales down in South Australia from Coffin Bay, and we'd actually sold some bags that day and we had to get them returned. And that was the day we opened.
That you opened at Port Wakefield.
And we were closed for 3 months. And that's of all the times on my darkest days, or when you think,
this is too hard.
Not so much too hard. I lost confidence in our product. Because if all of a sudden it's not, you got Vibrio and people getting sick, you didn't kill them, but they were just violently ill. And you go,
Well, oyster farming's actually now starting to sound really difficult. It's like these oysters seem to be really susceptible to disease and algae, and all sorts of things can go wrong with them.
Well, but we never had Vibrio ever before. So this was like coming in the blue.
Yeah, we never had COVID before either. There's always something.
But it was 3 months, and then it was gone. And then we'd set everything in place to make sure that we managed it from a health point of view. We've never had another outbreak since.
Yeah.
And so on we go. So the seafood centre went like crazy, did a really good job.
So this is Port Wakefield.
So
this is going really well now.
Yeah, that's going well. Yeah. It was only for those first. It was just months. That, when you're optimistic and then you open the door and then bang, you get slapped with a Vibrio. You go, what? Yeah. You couldn't write the script for this.
Yeah.
So, feeling optimistic again because everyone was spoiling, you want the oysters? And so away we went and we did quite well. Our landlord, we were renting that place at the time, and that's the worst thing I've ever done. But you sort of rented it because we weren't sure whether it'd work or not. But he wouldn't let us do fish and chips, and in the end I said, man, we want to do the full gambit here. We're not just here to sell oysters. And so he said, no, look, it's don't want to do it. He's
Sorry, listen, can I just ask, why did you choose Port Wakefield?
Port Wakefield had it was one of the great northern arterial highways where people move from east to west of Australia and north.
Yep.
And Port Wakefield was also the just around the corner to all the York Peninsula shacks and the people going down there. But there was no seafood there. So it was really because a lot of people had they would want to buy oysters from us in Coffin Bay and bring to Adelaide. But it was always inconvenient. They always had to come out to us. And we said, well, look, how about we'll do an online store. You order from us, we'll get them delivered to Port Wakefield, and on your way through, so if you leave at 7 or 8 in the morning, you're through there at 2 or 3 in the afternoon, pick up your bag of oysters and what other prawns and crayfish, whatever else you want, and trundle on into Adelaide. Perfect. So that was. It
does make sense.
Yeah, and it did. No, we grew the business there to quite a good business. But I just said to my landlord, I said, man, come on, you're either with us and support us in growing our business to its full potential, which I felt was quite significant. And he said, and I won't mention names or nationalities, but it was just he was one of the hardest people I've had to do a deal with. And I said, look, man, you with me or not? And he said, no. I said, no, I'm out, done, see you, bye. So he said, we'll move to Adelaide and set up in Adelaide or something along those lines with another outlet that's similar. But in the meantime, we said, well, let's go to Stansbury, and there was an opportunity to buy. So this is in 2025. So we're there for 3 years, and we closed the seafood centre on Easter 25, and we were going to Stansbury to get a factory, and that's got a retail outlet and everything else there. And 2 days later, after we get down there, guess what? Toxic algal bloom rolls into Stansbury. Come on, this can't be right.
That can't
This
be right.
can't be. We can't. What the?
So tell us about the current algal bloom. What's the name of this one?
This one is called Carenia, the family species, and the actual species is cristata.
But this one has been well publicised because it's affected vast parts of the state's beaches and marine life.
It's horrendous.
So what's different about this particular bloom and the others that have seemingly not lasted that long?
So this bloom, these are well-documented blooms around the world that have caused massive problems. In Mexico, what you call Gulf of America, is it called now, or Gulf of Mexico? They've had them since the 1800s, and the cristata over there. It's cool. It forms a brevetoxin in the oyster, and so the brevetoxin is the problem. The cristata, this nasty little algae. We'd never seen it before in South Australia. They'd had one in New Zealand Harbour in 2009, and that was brought in by ballast ships. And most of the outbreaks around the world where it doesn't occur naturally is been brought in with ballast water and ballast ships. So this one popped up at down here at Victor Harbour is where it started, and then just grew with the perfect nutrients and warm water and the right time of the year, and took off to Kangaroo Island, and then around to got York Peninsula, and then come up through Stansbury and up the Gulf, and away it went. So we didn't know much about it, but it killed. The oysters were tested. We test our oysters every month, like for meat and the water quality as well. So we're the canaries in the coal mine around South Australia. So we're very in tune with any issues, whether it's runoff or anything like that cause any health issues to the estuaries. So when this came along and we found out there was brevetoxin in the oysters, they're going, well, where's this brevetoxin coming? What are they eating? Now this cristata is a very small, very the algae is very hard to detect. So there's a whole heap of stuff that took ages to come around. Anyway, our oysters didn't die. They got very sick. They got very unhealthy. We had a lot of the species on the seafloor died. All the wobbegong sharks and all the octopus, everything just died. Bush razorfish dead, but the oysters hung on, and they closed right up. And they're up off the seafloor, and they must have been able to eat enough good healthy food that they could survive, and they didn't die. But we even had like a white pointer washed up in our 4.2 metre one in our oyster farm. So it's had a major impact on the marine environment. So it was tragic, and it sort of ended up around in Port Lincoln as well eventually, but it didn't come around the tip of your Eyre Peninsula.
Has it affected the tuna?
No.
So it's killing white pointers, but not tuna.
Oh, the tuna weren't here. Like the tuna are in the Gulfs. The tuna not in the Gulf.
Right.
But look, even the blue crabs never got affected. They're as thick as thieves, and even the whiting and all the fish stocks, they seem to be fantastic. Snapper are fine, but it really affected flathead. So anything was on the sea floor, like that's non-moving, they really struggled, and obviously it knocked the squid. Anything squid and octopus, they didn't like it. But it seems like most of the other fish species are pretty good. So, and the oysters survived okay.
So you've been looking at blooms like this for many years.
Oh yeah, that's our lifeblood.
This is something that has entered the consciousness of all South Australians, maybe some Australians. What's your best guess as to where this is going?
Well, where it's going, where it come from, I was hot on the trail of this outbreak, and because everyone's trying to understand where it's come from or what's happened. So it's obviously it started at Victor Harbour, well documented, and I did some research and I found out that there's because I was thinking it's ballast water. It's coming in. It's coming with a ship because it's not been found anywhere in South Australia ever before. I've spoken to the expert, the lady that ran all the show. She said that there is very small amounts of this cristata was found in the ground, but we'd never seen a bloom before, ever. And anyway, so I found out that there was two ships had been turned away from the Perth port in February of that year, 25, and they were redirected to the first and what they call an in-water federally approved cleaning station, where they're blasted with high-pressure divers go in, anchor them up, and then they go and they blast these big ships off. Everything just goes straight in the marine environment, and they do clean out the hulls because they take massive amounts of water, tens of thousands of tons of water for ballast water, and then they pour it all over the side as they're travelling around the world when they go to load up their grain or whatever. Guess where these two ships were sent was Victor Harbour.
So they get picked up in Fremantle, and the authorities in Fremantle say get out of here.
Too dirty. Too much biosecurity risk for us to have you come into our port. They didn't say what was on them. They said because they've got to have inspectors check for this sort of caper. It's it's sort of behind closed doors. They got redirected to the closest in-water cleaning station, which was just off Victor Harbour. Admittedly, I think it's about it's 40 k's offshore or 50.
So you can't see it from Victor.
Well, no, but I think you could on a good day. You would. I don't live at Victor, by the way, but I could. But it's there. But there's a thing called a Bonnie upwelling, which happens down there at Victor Harbour. A bit like it, but it's actually got a name. And it just so happened that year we'd had all that runoff from the River Murray, and we had above average water temperatures. Yeah, like when you're in a hatchery trying to grow food for spat, you need warm water, you need sunlight, you need the nutrients. And you got to add the algae to make it grow. Well, if they've got added the algae from these ballast, these ships that got cleaned, bushka, away she goes, an algal bloom can get triggered and away it goes. Having said that, there's also cruise ships that are there pulled up very close to Victor Harbour, and they were seen pumping water over the side, which they're not allowed to do. And so just like we move pests around the world with a foot and mouth in the ag sector, fire ants, cane toads, whatever. I mean, the problems with biosecurity in the marine environment is problematic because there's no fences. So the boats take on and then they unload, and ballast water is a really big deal.
What's really worrying about this particular one is that it just doesn't seem to be going away, and no one knows how long it's going to take until the water washes out.
It's definitely gone away.
Has it?
Yeah. Oh yeah. No. So Stansbury and the Yorks there, that all ran its race. So blooms run their race. And these blooms have been happening around the world for years, and like New Zealand Harbour had it, and it catastrophic, well documented. So it gave me a bit of optimism that this one will run its race. Just how long would it take? Would it be 3 months, 6 months, a year, or whatever? As it turned out, it was pretty much 9 months, and I think it was on January 26th they said, "Yep, all clear. Brevetoxin levels have gone below the regulatory period level, and they can't find any cristata in the water column." And we then sent our first batch of oysters over to Stansbury from Coffin Bay. We shipped nothing from Stansbury to Coffin Bay. There was a really big he did not want to spread this damn thing around the state. So we just we'd had 300,000 left at Stansbury that we couldn't shift before the bloom hit, and they were like 50 to 80 mil oysters. And they survived, but they didn't like it. But the beauty part is I'm confident now that if it comes back again, our oysters will survive. But we'll just manage our way through. Anyway, so we just put some fresh oysters there in January this year, and they've really taken off and started growing really well in February, and they've done an extremely good job. So yeah, so that's sort of like it doesn't mean we won't have it again, and we're still learning. This I just wish the government had just sort of said, look, these are things that could have triggered this algal bloom. It could have been ballast water, could have been ships, which is most likely what's happened. But they've sort of hung on to this. It's a naturally occurring algae, and
well, then you don't have to blame anyone.
Well, but it's also probably
or
the truth.
Hold anyone to account.
But it's probably the truth. That's they can't because they can't actually say that the ships didn't do it. Like it comes down to anyway. So look. I've been,
Well, if you think it's over, I think that's probably music to the ears of most South Australians.
So there's a Carenia Mickey Moitoi bloom in around Port Lincoln at the moment, like the one that got me in 2014. So that's one, and that occurs naturally every year in small numbers, but it's got some really bigger numbers, and they're a bit concerned about that, but that'll pass. That's a seasonal thing. but it is a bit bigger. Now, look, is the temperatures, is climate change affecting all this? I'm not sure. I won't go into that, but, certainly we've had algal blooms and issues for a very long time, but this cristata one has been a bugger, no doubt.
Well, if I can start rounding this out, you've had lots of challenges in the last 10 years.
Oh, yeah.
And it really I'm interested to know what you think the next couple of years look like and what has kept you going through really what's been a horrible 10 years in an industry which really promised so much prior to that.
Yes, you do wonder every now and then, do you hold to your mission? So a vision is you've got to turn it into a mission, and so that 500,000 dozen a year is the mission we're on. Well, obviously, is it achievable? I still believe it's highly achievable. We haven't had a good run at Stansbury, and we had some major structural infrastructure at Stansbury with seaweed floating around the size of football fields. That's all gone. That's never happened before. So we're rebuilding over there at the moment. The government's been very good to give us a resilient grant for up to $150,000. You had to prove that you were going to put it back into the community, infrastructure. And so we've initiated that. That's happening at the moment. The market is still really loves oysters or Coffin Bay oysters, so that's no problem there. I've got staff that have been with me over 30 years. Some have been with me for 20. They haven't seen the good times, really, but for a long time. I've got a son that's 22. He's oyster farming in his own right. But at the end of the day, I just love the product. The product we got. There's so many people love our product, and there's nothing better than giving people fresh Coffin Bay oysters, and they just love giving you money, and I love making them happy. So that side of things is really. But it's an itch I've got to scratch. I just know it. I'd hate to finish up and go, no, I didn't. Be like Michael Voss. It'd be like, God damn, just like that. That's the set. But it was out of his control. He left or got sacked. But I'm a bit more in control in my future, I'd like to think. So these are setbacks. But I've also got. I'm a Nuffield scholar. I did that in 2008. Which I travelled the world looking at food production systems with about 12 other scholars in all different other ag sectors. And one of them was Graham Finlayson from Brewarrina near Burke in the middle of New South Wales, edge of Queensland border. They were 5 years in drought. They just accept that. They expect a drought. And they manage their way through it. It's heartbreaking. They've got no food there. They offload all their cattle. They're shooting kangaroos, which are digging up all the It's just, and you look at it and go, well, geez, lucky I'm not a bloody farmer.
But going back to my earlier point about when you left the land, these people don't leave the land, and you're not leaving Coffin Bay because it's part of who you are.
That's right. It's certainly the fabric. I'm intertwined within that, and the production of that industry. And I want to see it through, and it's my staff around me. Like we've got, it's just we're all on.
So you want your staff and you want the region to see how great your business could be,
and to financially be able to give them more money as well. These guys are stuck with me through thick and thin, and I think we're like a football team trying to reach the GF, and we want to get the rewards for it. And look, and it's not easy, but then again, that's what drives us, I think. And we love what we do. Like it's even though today's stormy over there, they're in their wetsuits diving over the side, fishing out oysters, and they love it. Like it's fantastic.
Even with 70 kilometre-hour winds, they're going to be out there.
Yeah, well, you don't look at your clock, do you? You're just worrying about your life. But so over my lifetime, my oyster lifetime, I worked out last year, I've sold over 5,000 tonnes of oysters. So as much as all the setbacks, you go, this has happened, that's happened. But there's been a lot of good times. And to sell 5,000 tonnes of oysters, even I was surprised when I added it up. That's a lot of bloody oysters.
But imagine how many you could have sold had you not had the blooms, had you not had the problem in Tasmania.
And if you start to think like that, I reckon you'd jump off a cliff. You can't. And this is a problem. We talk about mental health and that. I think a lot of people look back at the coulda, woulda, shouldas. If you keep looking backwards, you don't. I think that just defeats optimism. You've got to look forward. You've got to look forward to
but
be
you seem to be
optimistic.
able to always look forward,
Oh,
the glass is half full.
Yeah, well, you need
and
to,
it doesn't matter how many times the glass has actually been fully empty, you're still thinking it's half full.
Yeah, but it's never been as bad as when I shot all my sheep. Like you can't, when that happened, that was like, there's no way out of this.
Yeah.
Like if I had to kill all
So
my
that
oysters,
setback at 26
Yeah.
really paved the way for a lot of optimism going forward.
Well, what do you call it? Strength, I suppose. Mental strength, but certainly you look back, you'll learn from what has gone wrong and gone right. And I think that. But if you're defeated, every time you look back, if you're defeated, it's really hard to get out of bed in the morning. But you got to find something in life, I think, that you want to makes you get out of bed in the morning. And so we've had that. And one of my favourite quotes, like back when I was with Philip Armfield, we used to. He was very good, very very good. Even though he was a bloody Port Power supporter, he was actually a director. He helped start Port Power, funnily enough. So. But one of my favourite quotes was, "Don't let it happen, make it happen." And I think that's what I think stood me in good stead. As a lot of people just they accept that this has happened to you and you can't do anything about it. But I don't subscribe to that. I think if you've got that attitude and you just got to make it happen.
Abraham Lincoln said something similar. I think he said something like, "Things come to those who wait, but only things left by those who hustle."
Yeah, well, certainly there's a lot. Don't get me wrong. I've seen a lot of people, not just in the oyster sector, but there's a lot of different ones. Like I look at the, sorry, I'm probably a little bit emotional about it now, but the wine industry. Oh, gee whiz. The poor buggers across Australia, it's catastrophic. They've poured their whole life into the planting, putting these vineyards in with the hope of growing the perfect grape juice to make the perfect wine. With a customer in a marketplace would take whatever they could grow. It's just not the case. And so this is a case. So I've got some friends who's down in the Renmark. And he's pulled his grapevines out and he's redirecting into almonds and citrus and stuff like that. And he's been ahead of the curve. But I've gone down there. I've been buying posts from out there pulled out of the vineyards, and I'm putting them back in at Stansbury and giving a new lease on life. And they're going, "God damn, we're going from Renmark to bloody Stansbury, we're in the water." So all these posts. So we're going to grow oysters on these same posts where they were growing grape juice. And I feel so sorry for the wine growers, but for them, it's their loss, my gain.
Yeah,
because these are quite cheap.
Yeah, it's tough.
And
times.
So you got to be a bit proactive and objective into the opportunities that come around, and there's always opportunities coming past us every single day. We just got to work out which ones to grab and which ones to let go to the keeper. And I think that's half the battle to life.
Well, Lester, you're an absolute inspiration, if I can say. I mean, my brother worked for the Kimberley Land Council, and he talked about how the Indigenous and the land are one. Yeah. And about how that's something that is very difficult for non-Indigenous to understand. I think it's a similar analogy. Sorry to not have a football analogy here, but it's a similar thing with business people, particularly people in farming, whether it be aquaculture farming or whether it be on the land, is that you are part of the business. And so the concept of giving up, even when things are really, really difficult, is just doesn't come into their mindset. And that's why people don't walk away more often than not. And Coffin Bay Oysters is a brilliant brand. Like I said at the beginning, it is not dissimilar to red wine in the Barossa Valley. It's the region is known for its production, and you and your business are a huge part of that. So well done. And thanks very much for coming and sharing your story with us today. It is an incredible story, and I really hope that we are, in footy parlance, we are getting close to midnight for Coffin Bay Oyster Farms, because it sounds like the next 3 to 5 years could be our premiership window.
Well, it's certainly certainly the opportunity is there. And wouldn't it be funny that when I first sold my oysters in 97, when the Crows won their first premiership, that if I reach my goal of 500,000 dozen, that the Crows win their next lot of premiership. It's been a long time between drinks.
It has been a while.
So,
Yes.
so I think that's probably a good analogy. But no, look, thanks very much for the interview. It certainly makes me look back and acknowledge the ups and the downs. And there's been a lot of good things. It's been a lot of good things that's happened through here. And met some amazing people and made a lot of people very happy, and we're very much glad to be part of, I suppose, the financial reward to their local community, because all that money comes into it. Not just there's a lot of other oyster farms there. It's a bigger employer of people, and that's keeping our footy clubs and our schools open. So it's a big deal, I think.
Yeah.
So,
Well, it's really, really important part of the Eyre Peninsula, and
absolutely,
you're making a huge contribution to your community, and you're doing some great things. So well done, and thanks again.
Well, I hope you learned something today.
Yeah, sure did. No, I hope everyone listening has enjoyed the chat.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you very much.
Good one. No worries.